The most jealous man in Hollywood just admitted which films haunt him at night. Tarantino literally said about one movie, if he could have made anything since becoming a director, it would be that one. Here are 10 films that made the master of violence admit defeat. Number 10, The Great Silence, 1968. Sergio Corbucci dropped the most nihilistic Western ever made, and Tarantino's been chasing that darkness ever since. Set in frozen Utah, the film follows a mute gunslinger called Silence, who protects poor settlers from bounty hunters. Instead of dusty deserts, you get blinding snow and dead bodies freezing before they hit the ground. The whole thing builds to a showdown. Everyone expects the hero to win. He doesn't. The bad guys murder everyone, ride away laughing, and the film just ends. Tarantino wrote an entire essay for the New York Times in 2012 explaining why this ending shook him to his core. He called it shocking to this day, and admitted he stole the snow setting for Django Unchained because he couldn't get the Great Silence out of his head. Director Corbucci made this right after the original Django, and critics were horrified by the bleak ending. Italian censors forced him to shoot an alternate happy ending, but nobody remembers that version. The film cost around $400,000 and barely made its money back in 1968. Audiences wanted heroes who won, not heroes who got slaughtered while trying to do the right thing. Tarantino keeps returning to this film in interviews because it proves that Westerns don't need happy endings to be powerful. The final massacre happens in slow motion, with Ennio Morricone's haunting score playing over the carnage. Jean-Louis Trintignant plays Silence with zero dialogue, just cold stares and quick draws. When The Hateful Eight came out, everyone noticed Tarantino finally got his snow western with a body count, but he's admitted, The Great Silence did it better because Corbucci had the guts to let pure evil triumph without apology. Number 9, Showgirls, 1995. Paul Verhoeven made a film so misunderstood that critics destroyed it, and Tarantino immediately defended it as a masterpiece. Showgirls follows Nomi, a drifter who claws her way to the top of Las Vegas showbiz through manipulation and violence disguised as entertainment. The film cost $45 million. Utzers bombed spectacularly, making only $20 million. Critics called it trash, gave it 7 Razzie Awards, and laughed it out of theaters. Tarantino saw it opening weekend in 1996 and told Details magazine it was incredible. While everyone else mocked the film, he recognized Verhoeven's savage commentary on American capitalism and ambition. The director of RoboCop and Total Recall wasn't making a bad movie. He was making a deliberate satire so vicious that audiences couldn't handle it. Elizabeth Berkley's performance as Nomi got ripped apart, but Tarantino understood she was playing a character fueled by pure rage and desperation. Every scene where she throws a tantrum or attacks someone is Verhoeven showing how the entertainment industry rewards sociopathic behavior. The infamous pool scene isn't bad filmmaking. It's a metaphor for how hollow and mechanical desire becomes when everything's for sale. The film got an NC-17 rating, and MGM dumped it into theaters with zero promotion. Critics competed to write the nastiest reviews, calling it one of the worst films ever made. But Tarantino kept championing it for decades, while the cultural conversation slowly caught up. By the 2010s, critics started writing essays about Showgirls as misunderstood satire. Verhoeven admitted he knew exactly what he was doing and didn't care that audiences missed the point. The film's now taught in film schools as an example of how a movie can be simultaneously sincere and satirical. Tarantino wishes he'd made it because Showgirls proves you can disguise genuine artistic vision as trash cinema and watch the world slowly realize they got played. Number 8. Audition, 1999. Takashi Miike created the most disturbing date movie ever filmed, and Tarantino immediately added it to his all-time favorites list. Audition starts as a gentle romance about a widower holding fake auditions to find a new wife. He picks Asami, a quiet young woman who seems perfect. Then the film becomes a nightmare that doesn't end until you're begging for it to stop. The final 30 minutes contain torture scenes so realistic that audiences walked out of festivals worldwide. Meek shoots the horror with surgical precision, turning everyday objects into instruments of pain. The famous wire saw scene made Tarantino physically uncomfortable, which is saying something from the guy who made Reservoir Dogs. He's called Audition one of the greatest horror films ever made because it earns its violence through character development. The film cost under $1 million and became a cult sensation through midnight screenings and whispered recommendations. Critics were split between those calling it a feminist masterpiece and those who saw it as misogynistic torture. Meek refused to explain his intentions, letting the ambiguity fuel endless debates. Eihei Shiina plays Asami with quiet intensity that makes her transformation from victim to villain genuinely terrifying. Tarantino respects how Miike spends an hour making you care about the romance before destroying everything. The torture isn't gratuitous because you understand exactly why Asami's doing it. Ryo Ishibashi's performance as the widower shifts from charming to pathetic as his deception catches up to him. The film asks whether manipulating someone emotionally is worse than physical violence, then refuses to provide easy answers. When Meek came to America, Tarantino threw parties in his honor and programmed Audition at his New Beverly Cinema repeatedly. The film proved that extreme horror could also be deeply psychological. Tarantino wishes he'd directed it because Audition balances art house sensibilities with pure exploitation in ways his own films attempt, but never quite achieve. Number 7. Unfaithfully Yours, 1948. Preston Sturges crafted the blackest comedy about murder ever made, and Tarantino considers it perfect filmmaking. Rex Harrison plays a symphony conductor who becomes convinced his wife is cheating. During a concert, he fantasizes 3 different ways to handle the situation: elegant murder, dignified divorce, and magnanimous forgiveness. Each fantasy plays out in full while he conducts, matching the music's emotional beats. The genius comes when the concert ends and he tries executing his perfect murder plan in real life. Everything goes catastrophically wrong in an extended slapstick sequence that turns homicidal rage into farce. Sturges directs it like a Hitchcock thriller crossed with a Chaplin comedy, proving that dark subject matter becomes even darker when played for laughs. The film bombed in 1948 because audiences weren't ready for a comedy about murdering your wife. Fox had just suffered through Sturges's previous flop and dumped this into theaters with minimal promotion. It made around $700,000 against a $2 million budget, effectively ending Sturges's Hollywood career. Critics who saw it were divided between those who recognized genius and those horrified by the subject matter. Tarantino discovered it in his video store days and immediately understood what Sturges was doing. The fantasy sequences show how cinema lets us play out violent fantasies safely, while the slapstick finale proves reality never matches our imagined control. Rex Harrison's performance shifts between suave sophistication and bumbling desperation perfectly. Linda Darnell plays the wife with knowing innocence, never sure if she should be frightened or amused by her husband's behavior. The conductor's fantasies get progressively darker, from poisoning to Russian roulette. But Sturges films them with operatic grandeur that makes the violence beautiful. When reality intrudes, the same actions become pathetic and embarrassing. Tarantino has referenced this structure in multiple interviews, explaining how cinema lets us explore terrible impulses without consequences. He wishes he'd made Unfaithfully Yours because it achieves perfect tonal balance between comedy and murder that his films chase but never quite nail. Number 6. Battle Royale, 2000. Kinji Fukasaku made the film that Tarantino called the one movie since he started directing that he wishes he'd made himself. Battle Royale takes a class of Japanese high school students, dumps them on an island, and forces them to murder each other until only one survives. It's Lord of the Flies meets teen exploitation, directed by a 70-year-old filmmaker who survived World War II and knew exactly what he was saying about society. The film cost $4.5 million and made $30 million in Japan despite massive controversy. Politicians tried banning it, claiming it glorified youth violence. Fukasaku responded by pointing out that adults created the game forcing kids to kill, not the other way around. The film became a phenomenon, spawning a sequel and influencing everything from The Hunger Games to Fortnite, though those properties never acknowledged the debt. Tarantino saw Battle Royale and immediately wanted to distribute it in America through Miramax. He failed because American distributors were terrified of the premise. The film didn't get proper US release until 2012, over a decade after it dominated Asian markets. He cast Chiaki Kuriyama in Kill Bill specifically because she played one of Battle Royale's most memorable killers. The genius is how Fukasaku makes you care about dozens of characters before systematically murdering most of them. Each death carries weight because you've seen these kids joking around and dealing with normal teenage problems. Then the game begins, and Fukasaku shoots the violence with documentary-style realism that makes every death feel permanent. Beat Takeshi plays the teacher running the game with sadistic glee, turning education into execution. The film's commentary on how society treats youth as disposable hit harder in Japan's recession economy. Fukasaku had watched classmates die during American bombing raids as a child, and that trauma fuels every frame. The film argues that forcing children to compete for survival isn't metaphorical. It's what capitalism does every day. Tarantino respects how Battle Royale never apologizes for its violence or explains away its premise. It just drops you into hell and lets you watch kids navigate impossible moral choices. The film's ending refuses redemption, showing that even the winner loses everything. Tarantino wishes he'd directed it because Battle Royale combines everything he loves: extreme violence, moral complexity, and genuine emotional devastation. Number 5, Jaws, 1975. Steven Spielberg accidentally invented the summer blockbuster, and Tarantino's been jealous ever since. Jaws is the film that changed Hollywood economics forever, proving that wide releases and massive marketing could turn movies into events. The story's simple: shark eats people, 3 guys hunt shark, shark almost wins. But Spielberg directed it with such precision that every frame builds unbearable tension. The film cost $9 million after massive production problems and overruns. The mechanical shark barely worked, forcing Spielberg to suggest the shark's presence without showing it. That limitation created one of cinema's greatest lessons. What you don't see is scarier than what you do. Jaws made $470 million worldwide, becoming the highest-grossing film in history until Star Wars 2 years later. Tarantino includes Jaws on his all-time favorites list because it's a perfect movie. Not a single wasted scene, not a single bad performance, not a single frame that doesn't serve the story. Roy Scheider, Robert Shaw, and Richard Dreyfuss create instant chemistry as 3 men who hate each other but need each other to survive. The Indianapolis speech Shaw delivers about shark attacks remains one of cinema's greatest monologues. Spielberg was 27 years old and terrified he'd destroy his career with this troubled production. Instead, he proved that a director who understands pacing and character can turn even malfunctioning equipment into art. The famous beach attack that establishes the shark happens mostly through reaction shots and John Williams's iconic 2-note theme. Audiences filled in the horror themselves, making it worse than anything Spielberg could have shown. The film's influence is immeasurable. Before Jaws, studios released movies slowly and let word of mouth build audiences. After Jaws, they spent fortunes on advertising and opened everywhere simultaneously. Tarantino has said multiple times he studies Jaws for its perfect screenplay structure. Every scene either builds character or advances plot, usually both simultaneously. The final confrontation delivers exactly what the audience wants: Shaw getting eaten after his heroic last stand, Dreyfuss surviving through clever thinking, and Scheider blowing up the shark with a rifle shot to an oxygen tank. It's preposterous and perfect. Tarantino wishes he'd directed Jaws because Spielberg made a film so technically flawless that it's still taught in film schools 50 years later as the template for how to build suspense. Number 4, Carrie, 1976. Brian De Palma made the perfect high school revenge movie, and Tarantino never stops talking about it. Based on Stephen King's novel, Carrie follows a telekinetic girl tormented by her religious fanatic mother and cruel classmates. The film builds to prom night, where humiliation triggers Carrie's powers and she murders nearly everyone. De Palma directed it like Hitchcock directing a supernatural slasher, using split screens and slow motion to turn teenage cruelty into operatic tragedy. Sissy Spacek plays Carrie with heartbreaking vulnerability that makes you root for her, even as she's committing mass murder. Piper Laurie as her mother delivers one of horror's most terrifying performances, turning religious devotion into psychological torture. The film cost $1.8 million and made $33 million, proving that smart horror could be financially successful and critically respected. Tarantino has called De Palma the greatest director of his generation and studied his split-screen techniques for years. The Prom Massacre uses multiple angles simultaneously, showing reactions and violence at the same time. De Palma's camera glides through the chaos with balletic precision, making carnage beautiful. Carrie's face covered in pig's blood became one of horror's most iconic images. The genius is how De Palma makes you understand why Carrie snaps. 2 hours of watching her suffer through abuse from every direction means the massacre feels like justice, not villainy. Amy Irving plays the one girl who tried to help Carrie, and her survival becomes its own punishment when she realizes her kindness came too late. The film suggests that society creates its own monsters by treating outsiders as subhuman. The infamous final jump scare, with Carrie's hand shooting from the grave, remains one of cinema's most effective shocks. De Palma admitted he stole it from Deliverance, but executed it so perfectly that nobody cares. The film's influence runs through every supernatural revenge story, since from The Rage, Carrie 2, to Stranger Things. Tarantino has used De Palma's split-screen technique in Kill Bill and other films, but admits the master did it better. He respects how Carrie earns its violence through genuine pathos. The film asks if revenge can ever be satisfying when it requires becoming a monster yourself. SpaceX's final scream as she watches her house collapse isn't triumph. It's the sound of someone who's lost everything, including her humanity. Tarantino wishes he'd directed Carrie because it perfectly balances style and substance in ways most genre films never achieve. Number 3, Blowout, 1981. Brian De Palma appears again because Tarantino called him the greatest director of his generation and Blowout his finest achievement. John Travolta plays a sound technician who accidentally records evidence of a political assassination while gathering audio for a slasher movie. De Palma constructs the film as a thriller about how technology can reveal truth and simultaneously be used to cover it up. The film cost $18 million and made only $12 million, bombing so hard it nearly ended De Palma's career. Critics appreciated it, but audiences stayed away from a paranoid political thriller in early Reagan-era America. Travolta was trying to rebuild his career after a string of flops, and Blowout's failure didn't help. But Tarantino discovered it in his video store days and recognized it as De Palma's masterpiece. The genius is how De Palma uses sound as the main character. Travolta's character pieces together the assassination by matching audio recordings to film footage, revealing contradictions that prove murder. The editing mirrors this process, cutting between images and sounds to show how manipulation works. De Palma studied the Zapruder film of JFK's assassination obsessively and recreates its horror through Travolta's growing realization of what he's witnessed. Nancy Allen plays a witness Travolta recruits to help expose the truth. Their relationship develops naturally, while the conspiracy tightens around them. John Lithgow appears as the assassin, playing him as a methodical professional who treats murder as routine work. The final confrontation happens during a Liberty Day parade, with fireworks and chaos masking the violence. De Palma's ending is devastatingly cynical. Travolta fails to save Allen, the conspiracy wins, and the only evidence of the assassination gets buried. Worse, Travolta ends up using Allen's death scream in his slasher movie, turning real tragedy into exploitative entertainment. The film suggests that truth doesn't matter in a world that prefers comforting lies to uncomfortable facts. Tarantino has chosen Blowout as one of his 3 desert island movies and calls Travolta's performance the reason he cast him in Pulp Fiction. He respects how De Palma made a film about how images and sounds can be manipulated to hide murder that itself manipulates images and sounds for maximum emotional impact. Tarantino wishes he'd directed Blowout because it achieves perfect synthesis of form and content, something every filmmaker chases but few accomplish. Number 2, Taxi Driver, 1976. Martin Scorsese made the definitive portrait of American loneliness and rage, and Tarantino's career exists in its shadow. Robert De Niro plays Travis Bickle, a Vietnam veteran driving a cab through 1976 New York City. Travis sees the city as a cesspool that needs cleansing, and his isolation metastasizes into violent delusion. The film builds to Travis attempting to assassinate a political candidate, failing, then massacring pimps in a rescue mission that accidentally makes him a hero. The film cost $1.9 million and made $28 million. That's launching both Scorsese and De Niro into stardom. It earned 4 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture, though it won none. Critics immediately recognized it as essential American cinema, a film that captured post-Vietnam disillusionment perfectly. Paul Schrader's screenplay turned his own suicidal depression into Travis's murderous rage, creating one of cinema's most complex anti-heroes. Tarantino has said Taxi Driver influenced every film he's made, particularly the way it treats violence as both horrifying and cathartic. Travis's final massacre is shot with handheld cameras that make you feel trapped in the carnage. De Niro's performance never lets you fully sympathize with Travis, even as you understand his pain. He's pathetic, dangerous, and utterly believable as an alienated man who decides violence is the only language worth speaking. Jodie Foster at 13 plays Iris, the child the film trades around like currency. Her scenes with De Niro are uncomfortable because Travis views saving her as redemption, while the film shows he's just another man trying to control her. Harvey Keitel plays her pimp sport with casual evil, turning exploitation into seduction. The film refuses to glorify Travis's rescue mission, even as newspapers praise him for it. Scorsese's direction creates a fever dream version of New York, where steam rises from manholes and neon lights bleed through windows. Bernard Herrmann's final score before his death adds mournful weight to Travis's descent. The famous mirror scene where Travis practices saying, "You talkin' to me," was De Niro's improvisation, instantly becoming cinema's most quoted monologue. The ending remains brilliantly ambiguous. Travis survives the massacre and gets celebrated as a hero, but his final glance in the rearview mirror suggests the rage hasn't disappeared. Scorsese refuses to confirm whether Travis learned anything or if he's just waiting to explode again. The film argues that American society rewards the wrong kind of violence while punishing those who dare to challenge power directly. Tarantino wishes he'd directed Taxi Driver because it perfectly captures urban alienation and transforms it into pure cinema. Every element serves the story: cinematography, editing, score, performance. It's the template for the American anti-hero, the film that proved disturbing protagonists could carry major movies if the filmmaking is strong enough. Number 1. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, 1966. Sergio Leone crafted the greatest Western ever made, and Tarantino has spent his entire career trying to match it. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly follows 3 gunfighters racing to find buried Confederate gold during the Civil War. Clint Eastwood plays Blondie, the mercenary with a moral code. Lee Van Cleef is Angel Eyes, a killer who always completes his contracts. Eli Wallach steals the film as Tuco, the bandito who survives through cunning and luck. Leone shot the film for $1.2 million in Spain, using the Spanish landscape to recreate the American West. It made over $25 million worldwide, becoming one of the highest-grossing foreign films in American history. Critics initially dismissed it as violent trash, but audiences recognized genius. The film's reputation grew over decades until it became acknowledged as not just the best Western, but one of cinema's greatest achievements. Tarantino has called Leone the most important filmmaker for modern directors and placed The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly at number 1 on his all-time favorites list. He studied every frame, analyzing how Leone uses widescreen compositions to create operatic spectacle from simple Western tropes. The final 3-way duel in a cemetery is cinema's most perfect ending, with Ennio Morricone's score building tension through pure music. Leone pioneered techniques that filmmakers still copy. Extreme close-ups of eyes before violence erupts, stretching time until tension becomes unbearable, using silence as powerfully as sound. The Civil War battle sequence, where hundreds die fighting over a worthless bridge, critiques American militarism while delivering spectacular action. Tuco's relationship with Blondie creates genuine emotional stakes in a film that could have been just shootouts and chases. Eli Wallach's performance is the film's secret weapon. Tuco is ugly, selfish, and cowardly, but Wallach makes him the most human character. His scenes discovering his brother became a priest add depth to what could have been a cartoon villain. Eastwood barely speaks, letting his eyes and presence do the acting. Van Cleef plays evil with casual professionalism, treating murder as routine business. The film's structure is brilliant, spending 2 hours on the character's journey before arriving at the cemetery for the final showdown. Leone films the Gold's location as sacred space, with thousands of identical graves creating visual poetry about war and death. The duel itself lasts over 5 minutes of pure silent tension before anyone draws. Leone's impact on Tarantino is obvious in every film he's made. The long takes, the sudden violence, the way music drives scenes, the respect for genre conventions while subverting them. Tarantino has tried recreating Leone's operatic style in Kill Bill and Django Unchained, but admits he can't match the master. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly achieves perfect balance between art and entertainment, philosophy and action, beauty and violence. Tarantino wishes he'd directed it because Leone made the film that proves Westerns can be simultaneously mythic and human. It's the movie that taught him cinema could be serious art without abandoning genre pleasures. Every time Tarantino stretches a scene to build tension, or uses music to elevate violence, he's following Leone's blueprint. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is the film Tarantino has been chasing his entire career, and the one he knows he'll never surpass. These films prove that even masters feel envy. Which one would you trade your entire filmography to claim? And here's the real question nobody wants to answer. If Tarantino had directed Battle Royale or Blowout instead of Reservoir Dogs, would we even know his name today? Drop your controversial takes below and defend them, like your career depends on it.